So I really want to spend some time today talking about what is now, at first we suspected it, but it's now very clear, is the real possibility of violence. I'm talking about physical violence if Donald Trump were to lose in November. And this is, I don't really want to make this about Trump because it's not. This really ties together sort of the faux populist rhetoric that I've been warning about. It ties together Fox News and the propaganda space. And in order to talk about this today, we're going to look at a clip from Tucker Carlson's program on Monday. I believe it was on Monday night. And what I want you to consider here is not just the growing influence of Tucker Carlson. And in fact, there are people now talking about what about Tucker for president in 2024? If Trump can be president, certainly, at least theoretically, Tucker Carlson could be president of the United States. And I know that that will be very, very scary to many of you. But I also want to use the clips we're going to look at today as a sort of case study in how the media propaganda cycle works and how it will completely reverse reality and take advantage of the lack of education and critical thinking skills that are part of what got Donald Trump elected in the first place. So Tucker Carlson is no longer playing coy. He is straight up saying the left is dangerous, the left hates America, and the left is a fundamental threat to the way of life that Tucker, I guess, espouses through his faux populist rhetoric. Tucker Carlson, in doing this, is setting the stage for violence if Donald Trump loses. He's both planting the seed of the idea in the minds of right-wingers, and he's giving right-wingers justification for doing violence if Joe Biden were to get elected in November. And the sort of crux of it is the left hates America. The left despises this country. And we're going to look at a segment. It was a 15-minute segment. We're going to look at some different pieces of it. And after opening up this segment by talking about how the left only hates Trump because they can't control him, not because he's incompetent, not because he's actively damaging the United States every single day. Tucker says the left just hates Trump because they can't control him. He's a free thinker. He's an independent mind. He starts to weave us through this left hates America idea by saying it starts in school. School kids aren't taught the history of Mount Rushmore and Thomas Jefferson that Donald Trump talked about at his July 3rd Mount Rushmore speech. And they're not taught about how the U.S. is a force for good that defeated fascism and communism. It starts in school, Tucker Carlson says. Take a look.
Yet, as the president pointed out, American school children learn virtually none of this. Instead, our curricula have become a toxic mix of lies and omission, all of it designed to poison our children against the country that formed them.
Against every law of society and nature, our children are taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but that were villains. The radical view of American history is a web of lies. All perspective is removed. Every virtue is obscured. Every motive is twisted. Every fact is distorted. And every flaw is magnified until the history is purged and the record is disfigured beyond all recognition.
Every word of that is true. If you have kids in school, you know it may even be understatement. What is happening in our classrooms right now in 2020 is a crime. It is long past time that a sitting president said so.
So why am I starting with the stuff about schools? Why is Tucker starting with the stuff about schools? This is how you start priming the right towards violence. Our schools have been taken over by liberal lies and liberal liars. Trump is saying it, and Tucker is willing to say it, and that's the framework for what is going to come. Now, the reason this is so pernicious is that our schools are failing. It is true that much of our education system is not working, but it's failing as evidenced by Trump being elected. In other words, it's failing as evidenced by 60 plus million people falling for the obviously false talking points of the Trump campaign in 2015 and 2016 and voting for him. So there's a big problem with our schools. But the problem isn't our kids are being taught what I guess Tucker and Trump say is some incorrect version of history. Our schools are failing in that American students are falling further and further behind in math and science compared to many other countries. Our schools are failing in that critical thinking and civics and media literacy are all but gone unless you're like really lucky or seek them out at some narrow slice of the school of public schools. And because of that, 60 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. But people fall for stuff like we have 15 cases of coronavirus, which will soon be zero, right? That's the evidence that education is failing. People fall for these bogus tax cuts that are really, you get a little more money in your paycheck, but your refund is smaller at the end of the year. Millions of people fell for that. So this is how Tucker lays the groundwork. Schools cannot be trusted, and schools are ruining our kids and turning them against our country. Now we go to the next part of this monologue, skipping ahead a couple of minutes. Tucker starts ginning up the hatred with dog whistles, starts up again with the violent protests. Check out how he transitions here.
If you spent the rest of your life trying to locate, to identify the worst people in this country of 330 million, you couldn't get a purer distillation than what you just saw. These people are liars. They're the same people who spent the last month telling you that the riots you saw live on television were actually peaceful protests against racism. That was a lie. They knew it was a lie when they said it, but they said it anyway in order to undermine a country that they hate. Yes, hate. America deserves to be in flames. That is their view. And this weekend, they said it essentially out loud.
No one said that riots and looting were peaceful protesting. What we said was, which is true, we had overwhelmingly peaceful protests against police brutality. And in addition to that, there were some looters and there were some rioters. And I can only speak for myself, but I didn't say that that was evidence of peaceful protesting. The peaceful protesting was peaceful protesting. The other stuff was other things. But now you see the big picture, the narrative that Tucker Carlson is weaving. And I admit it, he does it well. These are well-scripted monologues where, listen, schools are teaching kids to hate America. That was part one. Then those kids become left-wing rioters who go out and destroy our cities because they've been taught to hate America. So he's building up the justification for violence if Donald Trump were to lose. And then he goes fully into it. The left hates America. That is the next part of the message. And if Tucker convinces his audience that the left hates America, violence against the left in their eyes would be justified because it would be protecting America. And that's where Tucker keeps going and comes full circle now with Joe Biden. This is a clever monologue. This is, because a lot of the people who watch these programs lack the basic critical thinking and epistemology skills and media literacy skills, this is a far more clever monologue than most of Tucker's viewers are going to be able to pick apart for what it is. You start with our schools teach kids to hate, which has led the left to hate America and go and riot. And then that same left who hates America wants to elect Joe Biden. And that's how he links it all together to Joe Biden and lays the groundwork for violence if Biden wins. Take a look.
So where's Joe Biden on all of this as the revolution continues apace? Biden is supposed to be a moderate, remember? That was his chief appeal. But there was nothing moderate about Biden's 4th of July statement. Instead, it was a full-throated attack on the United States.
Our country was founded on an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We've never lived up to it. Jefferson himself didn't. He held slaves. Women were excluded. American history is no fairy tale. There's been a constant push and pull between the two parts of our character. The idea that all men and women, all people are created equal, and the racism that has torn us apart. We have a chance to rip the roots of systemic racism out of this country.
That's your 4th of July message? Systemic racism? Something you can't even define, that has no real definition? Really? Wagging your finger in the face of the nation that promoted someone as mediocre as you to the position you currently hold? This is the man who could soon be our figurehead.
So now you've seen the full path. The left hates our country because schools are teaching them to. After learning to hate the country, they go out and attack the country by rioting and looting. And then they will support Joe Biden, who is supportive of that America hatred and rioting and looting. he's suggesting the imagery of a Joe Biden presidency as a presidency equivalent to, tantamount to, hating America and rioting and looting. And then on the tail end, Tucker wraps it up with this sort of faux modest statement of, on this program, we really try not to question people's patriotism because that's a really serious thing to do. But we have to, because clearly these people hate the country. Take a look at that.
So what to make of all of this? Well, it's long been considered out of bounds to question a person's patriotism. It's a very strong charge, and we try not ever to make it. But in the face of all of this, the conclusion can't be avoided. These people actually hate America. There's no longer a question about that. And yet, paradoxically, at the same time, they desperately want to control America more than anything. And that leads to the most basic of all questions. Can you really lead a country that you hate? Ask yourself, what kind of parent would you be if you hated your children? What kind of officer would you make if you didn't care about your troops? It would be awful. The results would be ugly. It would not work. Loving the people you lead, caring deeply about them, is the most basic prerequisite of leadership. The leaders of today's Democratic Party do not. They despise this country. They have said so. They continue to. That is shocking, but it is also disqualifying. We cannot let them run this nation because they hate it. Imagine what they would do to it.
They hate America is the fundamental message. So the right is falling for this hook, line, and sinker. And it is so unhinged that it actually could bring the right to violence if Joe Biden wins. If you believe Tucker about this, if you sit there for the 13 and a half minutes or however long it is, and you nod along and you say, yeah, schools are teaching kids to become protesters who riot and then elect Joe Biden. If Trump loses on November 3rd and you believe that, you might feel justified in going out with your guns to try to put a stop to this America hatred from the left. And this gets us back to something that I've now had to bring up 3 or 4 times, which is the populist rhetoric bamboozles people. When I talked 6 weeks ago, maybe, about how I'm worried that left populist rhetoric may be replacing the actual set of ideas that is social democracy, the main concern was the rhetoric sounds pretty damn good. And it's very similar rhetoric from left to right when it comes to populism. The middle class is the core of this country, and we need to support the average person and all of this different stuff. This is exactly what I'm talking about, because then they slip in the prescription, which is no leftists, conservative school agendas, no immigrants, Black Lives Matter will take your house. The prescription is absolutely bonkers. And notice that Tucker doesn't talk about policy. And when Tucker bragged in the monologue, I don't know if I played it, but it was in the monologue. Tucker said Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore was one of the best of his presidency. Tucker said, you'll notice that that speech at Mount Rushmore had essentially no policy ideas. It was Trump railing against Marxists who don't exist. There's no prominent Marxist that Trump is reasonably fighting against. He railed against anarchists on the left. He railed against people who teach our kids to hate America. There was no list of accomplishments of what Trump did other than, lies about defeating the virus, which we clearly haven't done. And there was no sort of guidebook for what you would get policy-wise from Trump in his second term. This is the epitome of being bamboozled by populist rhetoric. No policy. And Tucker says that was a great speech. Trump really laid it out. All Trump laid out is an imaginary enemy, a straw man from the left of these violent Marxist anarchists which don't exist. And then Trump then has the benefit of Tucker going to his audience and saying, that was a great speech. It was an amazingly good speech that Donald Trump gave. All Trump said is the left is radical and hates everybody and blah, 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 and respect our heritage. Again, another allusion to Confederate statues and the Confederate flag. So this is extremely dangerous, and it's particularly dangerous for 2 reasons. One, I'm not trying to insult people when I say this, but the lack of critical thinking and media literacy skills in this country makes this stuff really effective. That monologue already has like 1.5 million views on YouTube, and there are people on the right and even some on the left who are getting tricked into sharing this Tucker Carlson stuff. So We've got to do something about it. I don't even know what it is because the audience that he is catering to with this garbage is ripe for it. They're not going to then come and watch me spend 15 minutes explaining to you how you're being bamboozled by this. So if I don't sound optimistic, it's because I'm not. I don't know what the solution is, and it's extraordinarily dangerous what's going on. I want to hear your thoughts about it. I'm on Twitter at @Pakman. Remember that you can get the full audio podcast of the show every day on whatever your favorite podcasting platform is, be it Spotify or Pandora or iTunes or Google Play. It's free. Get the daily podcast. And then next Tuesday, two big things going on Tuesday. Number one, the third David Pakman Show chess tournament at 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. You can register for free at davidpakman.com/chess. And then number two, we took a big hit on memberships in the last week. We're trying to dig out from a hole of like 300 cancellations. So Tuesday, the same day as the chess tournament, we're going to do a one-day membership special where we will email out to everybody on our mailing list a very exclusive one-day discount code. By exclusive, it just means you've got to be getting our newsletter. You can sign up to be notified on davidpakman.com, upper right of the website. Type in your email address, sign up for the newsletter. You'll be notified very powerfully on Tuesday. And then I hope you'll join us for the chess tournament as well.